media outlets that have a critical view on Canadian foreign policy. The Canada Files is another one outlet I've written before. I don't agree with every take they have on Canadian foreign policy. I think some of what they write is a little too glorifying of like Chinese and Russian or Iranian foreign policy. It's certainly a voice that should be heard and listened to, because I mean, at the end of the day, like, there is no objective truth, right? I mean, it's just people's different perspectives, and the only way to even approximate some form of objectivity is to account for as many different perspectives as you can.
Frogs, did you want to respond directly to that? I do see your hand up, and then we have a question via tweet that we'll go to.
Thank you, yes. I thought there was a time, well, I used to hear that the U.S. would say, oh my God, in Canada you're not allowed to say, to lie in the media. And that's a long time ago, because as far as I can see, we're lying all the time about pretty much everything. When it comes to foreign policy, I want to make that clear. I think that there's not enough interest. I don't know what it is, but it's not just about foreign policy, actually. It's about a lot of things. We lie by not telling the truth, kind of thing. I know that there are some places like Canada Land and blah blah blah. I know those places, but there's so few of them, and I don't understand why the journalists in Canada do not put a front up and say, no, we're not going to say what the Canadian government wants on Israel or Ukraine. We're going to do what we see and what we hear. Like, why is it so difficult to say the truth? I'm sorry, I am a bit emotional, but that's because I'm so fed up with this. Thank you.
No, I totally share your frustration on that, and I think the reason is people know. I mean, when you speak out for Palestine, for example, you're going to get backlash from pro-Israel groups. You're going to be accused of animus towards not just the state of Israel, but to Jewish people writ large. If you talk about the far right in Ukraine and question where all this money we're sending there is going, you're going to be accused of being a Kremlin stooge, right, etc., etc. And so that has the effect that's intended, which is people keep their noses to the ground and don't talk about foreign policy, or when they do talk about foreign policy, they just speak about it in the confines that is acceptable, right? So maybe we'll talk about how the Israelis and Palestinians are equally to blame, and why don't they just all get along, rather than this, extremist pro-Israel perspective that we see from the conservatives and the liberals. I mean, that just sort of falls into the same trap, right?
Well, basically, it's cowardice, same as the police. Like when we talk about the police, it's always like journalists just say copy paste whatever the cops tell them, instead of trying to investigate what really happened when cops kill someone or something like that. I mean, it's more than just foreign policy. I mean, we get lied to all the time. I am tired of this. How the hell do we get out of this shit?
Awkward part. This is a sing along.
Well,
I would say that.
It's a sing back and forth.
Sorry, you go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, no, and I just want to make sure we include the questions that it kind of ties into this, because one of the listeners was in the audience here asks, our mainstream media, especially the folks at Frogs, is so frustrated with. I know you mentioned it's worth following and there are good folks in there, but I think the basis of the question, I'm going to paraphrase, is are they not complicit, by taking pay and direction on what they're going to report? Are they, and not being courageous, as Frogs mentioned, are the members of the mainstream media and the outlets that are guilty of the things that we've mentioned here, not complicit? Can they defend their position?
Well, I know a lot of journalists in the mainstream media, and they're who have utmost integrity, and they're doing what they can within the confines that they're allowed to. And I mean, that's one way of doing things, and I don't think it's completely illegitimate. And that's why, I do a lot of media criticism in the newsletter, but when I critique reporting, I tend not to, unless it's really egregious, call out reporters by name. I call out the news outlet, because at the end of the day, the buck stops at their editors, right? But if it's like a pundit, if it's someone who's paid for their opinions and they barely get edited, if at all, then I'm pretty ruthless with those people, because there's such a desert of opinion that isn't right wing in this country, and it needs to be confronted.
Exactly. We need to be confronted with the truth.
So the best way to confront people with the truth is to provide it and amplify it. So Jeremy, how can the reporters that we're very frustrated with, that you're telling us, they're doing the best that they can, how can we make it more appealing for them to come over from the dark side? To make folks that are reporting the truth, that are, trying maybe to be a little bit more objective or shed light on truths that need seeing, how can we make that more lucrative? How can we build, you use the Maple as a good example perhaps of a successful independent outlet, but even then, I had not really read much of what they had put out until it was referred to me, not that long ago. So how do we expand that reach? How do we get journalism on the straight and narrow?
Well, I guess I don't really see the mainstream media necessarily as directly in competition with what I do, or other independent friends and peers do. I mean, we don't have the resources to compete with mainstream news outlets. And again, there's lots of good work that gets done within those confines. I think what we in independent media do is complementary at the end of the day, and that's not an excuse for the just absolutely gutter level punditry in this country, or this sort of I guess what I would call nuance mongering by a lot of reporters who make things sound more complicated than they in fact are. But I think one thing is we need a strong public broadcaster, and we don't have one. We have an incredibly weak, in many many ways ineffective public broadcaster in the CBC. And, you know, some, I guess, more perhaps irony-poisoned leftists would say, oh, yeah, I agree with Poilievre, defund the CBC and start from scratch. But I think the CBC needs more resources, and also everyone in charge needs to be fired and replaced with people who actually understand what a public broadcaster is and what it's supposed to do. Because I mean, the CBC right now, I mean, you know, I have my own experiences with them, but beyond that, I think that there's clear effort on their part to try and appease this right-wing populist movement by sort of tailoring